What's something that sounds like a conspiracy theory, but is actually true? In 2002, a cable technician named Mark Klein, working for AT&T in San Francisco, was sitting at his desk when he received an email from his bosses that a representative from the National Security Agency, NSA, would be coming to visit for some unspecified reason. He was to give this NSA technician access to a cable substation for him to perform some work. The tech did his thing, and Mark moved on, without thinking anything of it. A year later, in 2003, Mark was transferred to that cable substation, and by chance was assigned to monitor the internet room. This was the room where all the fiber optic ocean cables that carry the country's internet traffic terminate. While he was reviewing engineering drawings, he realized that the schematics revealed a secret room. More importantly, the plans showed cabinets filled with fiber optic splitters, coming off every cable, and feeding into the secret room. And to make it even crazier, neither he, nor anyone on his team, had access to the secret room. Through his investigation, he discovered that the NSA representative he had escorted the previous year had worked to install this system, which was sending a copy of all the internet traffic that passed through the substation straight to the NSA. In other words, he had proof that the federal government had the capacity to tap into all internet traffic in the country. And I mean all of it. Every email, instant message, electronic sale, medical or criminal records, research database. Everything. Complete unrestricted access. Like any sane person, he was extremely disturbed by this discovery. He went to his higher-ups, but was essentially told to just keep it quiet. After retiring in 2004, he linked up with a group called Electronic Frontier Foundation, and essentially blew the whistle. He did interviews, and handed over all his evidence to reporters. I watched one of these interviews in 2006, which is how I know about this story. I remember thinking it was so obvious, once he explained it. Why wouldn't the NSA tap into the internet traffic in the age of the War on Terror? I'd watched Enemy of the State. But nothing happened. No one I spoke to seemed to believe it, and Mark Klein's story eventually seemed to just fade away. 7 years later, in 2013, Edward Snowden leaked documents, essentially confirming everything, and then some. But to this day, everyone looks at me like a crazy person when I talk about knowing about it, as early as 2006. Operation Snow White. Basically, during the 70s, the Church of Scientology was concerned with all the bad press surrounding them, and all the other dirt on them that could be released. So, they used a huge number of contacts that they had in various US government agencies to destroy all negative information about the Church of Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard. The crazy thing is, they succeeded with much of the plan before they were caught. There was a shit ton of negative info on Scientology in the 70s, possibly enough to destroy the church, and it'll never see the light of day, because they used their huge influence to have it destroyed. The Greenbrier Bunker. People love conspiracies about huge underground complexes, built for the rich and famous, to survive nuclear fallouts. Think Denver Airport, and that's exactly what Greenbrier is. The bunker was built under the Greenbrier Resort for Congress people to escape to, and was kept a secret for 30 years, even though people suspected, why is there a 7,000-foot airstrip for a town of 3,000 people? For the entire time it was functional, every congressperson was assigned a bunk. These days you can take tours, and I'm sure we'll hear about the next bunker once it's defunct. Many prisons in the US are private, for-profit companies. They get paid by the head, and also employ the prisoners, for pennies per hour, to do work like telemarketing. You've probably talked to a prisoner on the phone, without realizing. And those private prisons get paid by the state, if they aren't full enough. Guaranteed occupancy, and profit. To add to your comment, about 8.5% of prisoners in the US are incarcerated in private facilities. The current administration has issued an executive order to stop licensing these facilities for federal inmates. However, since most private prisons are operated at the state level, few will be affected by the order. That the US government actually had a paranormal unit. That movie, The Men Who Stare at Goats, it was based on a true story. The US military was actively trying to see if they could find people with skills like stopping the heart of a goat, or dowsing, or psychic spying. The whole thing pretty much fell apart when it was deemed that the people participating were not very effective. If you have to stare at a goat for hours in order to get it to fall over and die, how are they supposed to make use of it for assassinations? But, bottom line, it did exist. Same with the Nazis. having a paranormal unit during the 40s. Hitler believed in acquiring the Spear of Destiny, because he believed it would help him win the war, along with other occult stuff. That's partly what the Wolfenstein games have made popular. In the 60s and 70s, thousands of Native American women were sterilized without their consent, as part of a practice to sterilize poor and minority women, to help their financial situation and their families' quality of life, by preventing unwanted pregnancies in poor communities. Some were not informed at all, and had it done to them completely without their knowledge. Others were threatened with having their health care taken away, if they did not agree to have it done to them. Some studies estimate that as many as 25 to 50% of Native American women were sterilized in the 1970s, representing tens of thousands of victims. This is essentially a modern-day genocide in the United States. The CIA fed unreasonable amounts of drugs to people to document the effects and search for new weapons. I can't imagine taking heroic doses of LSD and then getting grilled by government scientists for days. CIA Project MKUltra, searching for a new truth serum, and the agents they dosed had no idea at the time. Fun fact, its predecessor was called Project Artichoke. A main ingredient in the flavor of Coca-Cola still only comes from processing coca leaves into cocaine. The extract goes to the Coca-Cola flavor profile, and the cocaine that is produced as a byproduct gets sold to the health industry for medicinal use. There is only one company in the US authorized to do this, that has had a special arrangement with the DEA for nearly 100 years. The CIA funded and organized the overturn of several South and Central American socialist governments. Not only socialist governments. Democracies. The US has never been unilaterally in favor of democracy. That is a useful talking point, and good propaganda, for our own people. The truth is, we support whichever government is useful for our interests, at that point in time. This isn't complete tinfoil hat territory, it's effective policy. Idealists don't make it that far on the world stage. The US and the UK conspired to overthrow Iran's democratically elected Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, and restore the autocratic regime of the Pahlavi monarchy. They did this because Mossadegh tried to nationalize Iran's oil industry. This set the stage for the next 70 years of Middle East conflict. The Iranian monarchy gets overthrown by anti-Western ayatollahs in 1979, so then we throw in with Saddam Hussein in Iraq, because he hates the Iranians. But Saddam invaded our allies Kuwait in 1990, and we had to drive him out. He used chemical weapons, which we gave him, against Iran and the Kurds. But eventually, he made enough people nervous, at least in the Bush administration, that we invaded Iraq at the same time as Afghanistan. GM, IBM, and Ford played a major role in rearming Germany in the 1930s. George Bush's grandfather, Senator Prescott Bush, was a director and shareholder of companies that profited from their involvement with the financial backers of the German forces. Henry Ford was the only American whom Hitler mentioned by name in Mein Kampf in a favorable light. Your iPhone is designed to start getting worse as soon as the new models come out. I remember this being a big deal, like 7 or 8 years ago. Someone can fact check me as I'm hazy on the details, but I believe it's related to the battery. Every year, the same week that the new iPhone comes out, the latest iOS becomes available for download. The new iOS is not optimized for your current device's battery, and as such, the phone compromises performance in order to maintain a similar battery life. Coupled with the normal wear and tear on the battery, your phone will start sucking, just so the battery can last a little longer. Amelia Earhart landed on an uninhabited Pacific island and died as a castaway, making distress calls for days that were initially acted upon, then later disavowed by the Navy as hoaxes after their botched search failed to find the plane. 3 years later, bones were found by the British military on the island next to parts of a woman's shoe. The bones were misidentified as male by an unqualified examiner and then lost. Measurements of the bones were later unearthed from the British records, and when run through modern forensics, were proven to be Northern European female. The Black Sox scandal was a major sports controversy that rocked the baseball world in 1919. It involved members of the Chicago White Sox, one of the best teams in the league at the time, who were accused of throwing the World Series against the Cincinnati Reds. The scandal involved 8 players, including shoeless Joe Jackson, who allegedly accepted bribes from gamblers to intentionally lose games. At first, many people thought the scandal was just a conspiracy theory, as the players denied any wrongdoing. The team was arguably in the top position, some of the accused were insanely popular, and some fans believed that the accusations were just a way to tarnish the team's reputation. However, an investigation uncovered evidence of a complex scheme, involving gamblers, team owners, and players. The investigation revealed that the players had definitely accepted bribes, that tune of a couple million today. I'm not a huge sports fan at all, but I am a history nut, and this was one of the most significant scandals in sports history, and it changed a lot of things for the entire sport, including getting a commissioner of baseball. Even though they were technically declared criminally innocent, all 8 players involved were all banned for life, and they will never be inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame, despite repeated attempts to do so over the decades. That the Ministry of Information, in the UK, spread misinformation that eating lots of carrots could improve night vision during World War II. They made this up to confuse the Germans. They had a new radar tech that allowed them to pinpoint German bombers from greater distances than before, and the carrot story was a ruse. That said, I don't know what's true on the internet these days, so I'm half waiting for the comment that this story in itself was a ruse. Nestlé's baby formula scandal. Nestlé aggressively marketed baby formula to mothers in developing countries by giving free samples to hospitals and buying up billboards. The mothers would use them instead of breast milk, and eventually stop producing breast milk. Then they'd need to buy formula to continue feeding their babies. Formula needed to be mixed with water, but because they often didn't have clean water, they'd put their babies at risk, mixing the formula with unclean water. Also, literacy rates were lower in a lot of those places, so the mothers didn't know how to clean the bottles and couldn't read the instructions on the packaging. Those that did, often didn't have the means to carry them out. A lot of them, being poorer, also resorted to watering down the formula to try and make it last longer, but then it wouldn't have enough nutrients for the baby. Nestlé downplayed all of this, and said it wasn't their responsibility, that people here didn't really have access to clean water, and that they were just giving people the freedom of choice. The Canadian government actually tried to fry people's brains with ECT in order to fix their depression, thinking that the wiping of neurons that have a negative emotional event will fix their depression. Instead, people ended up losing their memory, suffered inconsistent, and forgot their name, all while still having depression. This was in part funded by the CIA, in an effort to understand memory alteration. Big Tobacco cover-up is a prime example. For decades, tobacco companies knew about the harmful and addictive effects of smoking, but actively suppressed research, manipulated data, and marketed cigarettes as safe. It wasn't until the 1990s, after internal documents were leaked, that the truth about their deceitful practices was fully exposed. They also have funded ineffective anti-smoking campaigns, in place of effective anti-smoking campaigns. They also have radiation in them, that they've known about for decades, because of the naturally occurring isotopes in the soil sticking to the leaves more, because of the chemicals they use on them. Makes the cancer rates even after a long period of not smoking, etc., make a lot of sense. In 2016, a former reality TV show host, vying for political office, began working to convince citizens of the United States that the election he was participating in was rigged, only to learn that he had actually won the election. 4 years later, in 2020, when seeking re-election, this same politician attempted to again convince the citizens of the United States that the very same election process that had given him his then current position was rigged. This time, of course, he lost the election. This time, however, he had in fact convinced a large number of people that the election was rigged. And now I can't have a normal family dinner, because it's apparently a conspiracy that the United States of America has a voting system that works. Operation Northwoods, I believe it was called, back in the day, was wild. The US government tried to plan a false flag attack on US soil as justification to officially declare war on Cuba. They tried to make people look crazy, or make us think the government would never do that to us. Then it turned out they actually wanted to do it, and became public knowledge. That your phone is listening to you. You talk about wanting a new pair of shoes, and suddenly, every ad you see is for sneakers. It feels like a wild conspiracy. But algorithms and voice data collection are definitely a thing. Creepy, but real. Yep. I've seen this many times. The one that was most obvious to me was when I watched a show where the characters were primarily speaking French. Within 2 hours, there was an ad on my phone for the best restaurants in Lyon. I have no interest in visiting France, and nothing in my browsing history, or anything else, would have made it seem that I did. The Tuskegee Syphilis Study. Between 1932 and 1972, the United States Public Health Service conducted a study involving hundreds of African American men who had syphilis. These men were never informed of their diagnosis, or offered proper treatment, even after penicillin was identified as a cure. The objective of the study was to analyze the long-term effects of the disease. Although it sounds unbelievable, this event is entirely true, and is considered one of the worst ethical violations in the history of medicine in the United States.